The rain hammered against the window pane, a dreary song matching the one playing in Alex's heart. He sat hunched on a worn-out couch, surrounded by boxes he hadn't unpacked in months. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that broke through the cloudy sky, highlighting the mess that had become his life. Each box was a memory, a hope, or a dream he had once held dear, now just a silent reminder of how far he had fallen. He stared at his hands, rough and calloused from work he never imagined doing. Just a few years ago, Alex had been full of laughter and big plans. Now he felt like a forgotten toy, broken and tossed aside. Every path he'd tried to take, every door he'd opened, seemed to lead to a dead end. His phone lay silent beside him, a stark contrast to the buzzing it used to make with calls from friends and family. Now, no one called. He'd pushed them all away, or maybe they'd simply drifted from him like leaves in a strong wind. A sigh escaped his lips, heavy and full of defeat. He pictured his life as a giant game of Jenga. Piece by piece, everything good had been pulled away, leaving him with a wobbly tower about to crash. His job, his home, his friendships, all gone. He felt a deep, aching loneliness that settled in his bones. It wasn't just sadness. It was a feeling of being completely lost at sea, without a map or a paddle. He closed his eyes, wishing he could rewind time, go back to a point where things made sense. But time, he knew, only moved forward. And for Alex, moving forward felt like climbing a mountain with no top in sight, carrying a backpack full of rocks. He was tired, so incredibly tired. This wasn't the life he had dreamed of, not even close. He was at rock bottom, and the thought of finding a way out felt like an impossible fairy tale. He wondered if he even had the strength to try anymore. The heavy silence in the room was suddenly broken by a faint memory, like a gentle breeze rustling through old leaves. Alex's mind drifted back, away from the gloom, to a time when his world was bright and full of promise. He saw himself as a small boy, maybe 7 years old, sitting cross-legged on the sun-warmed grass in his backyard. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and summer flowers, and the sky was a brilliant, endless blue. Little Alex, with his bright, curious eyes and a mop of unruly brown hair, was drawing in a worn-out notebook. He wasn't just doodling, he was planning. He drew a tall, gleaming skyscraper, a fancy car parked outside, and a happy family waving from the windows. "I'm going to build big things, Mom," he declared, holding up his masterpiece to his smiling mother. "And I'll have a house with a big garden and a dog named Lucky." His mother would ruffle his hair, her laughter like a sweet melody. "That sounds wonderful, my boy. You can do anything you set your mind to." Her words, filled with so much love and belief, echoed in his ears even now. Young Alex had believed it too. He imagined a life filled with adventure, where challenges were just exciting puzzles to solve, and every day brought a new chance to learn and grow. He pictured himself traveling the world, meeting interesting people, and always coming home to a cozy place filled with warmth and laughter. He hadn't just dreamed of success. He dreamed of happiness. He imagined being a good friend, a helpful neighbor, and someone who always tried his best. He saw himself celebrating small victories and learning from big mistakes, always with a positive spirit. The idea of ever being stuck, lost, or alone was a faraway concept, a dark cloud that couldn't possibly touch his sunny future. He felt invincible then, filled with a childlike certainty that life would unfold just as beautifully as he drew it in his notebook. That innocent hope, once so strong, now felt like a fragile, forgotten butterfly, fluttering briefly before disappearing back into the shadows of his mind. The image of his younger self, full of boundless optimism, faded like a watercolor left in the sun. Alex's thoughts snapped back to a more recent past, to the first crack in his carefully built world. He remembered the day his boss called him into the office, not for a promotion, but for a talk that felt like a punch to the gut. Mr. Henderson, usually so cheerful, looked grim as he explained the company was downsizing. Alex's position, after 5 years of hard work and dedication, was being cut. The words, "We have to let you go," echoed in his ears, louder than any alarm bell. He walked out of that office in a daze, the bright afternoon sun feeling strangely cold. It wasn't just a job, it was his first real step toward that skyscraper and big garden he'd drawn as a boy. He loved his work, the challenge of it, and the team he'd built strong friendships with. Now, it was all gone. He remembered sitting in his car, parked far away from the office, just staring at nothing. A knot formed in his stomach, tight and painful. He had always been so proud of being able to take care of himself, of making his own way. This felt like a huge failure. The worst part was telling his parents, seeing the worry in their eyes, even though they tried to hide it with brave smiles. He felt like he had let them down, and more importantly, he had let his younger, dreaming self down. That night, sleep wouldn't come. He replayed every conversation, every project, trying to find where he went wrong. Was he not good enough? Did he miss a sign? The sadness was a heavy blanket, muffling every other feeling. He started to pull away from his friends, too embarrassed to admit he was no longer the successful, driven Alex they knew. That job loss wasn't just about money, it was about his identity, his confidence, and the first big piece of his Jenga tower crumbling. It was the first time he truly felt life had knocked him down, and getting back up seemed like a task too heavy to bear. After losing his job, Alex tried to gather his courage. He spent countless hours online, updating his resume and sending it to every company he could find. He went to networking events, forcing himself to smile and shake hands, even when his heart wasn't in it. For a while, it seemed like things might turn around. He got a few interviews, even a second one for a promising role that felt like a perfect fit. Hope, a tiny, flickering candle, began to glow inside him again. He started to imagine himself back on track, rebuilding what he had lost. But just as that candle of hope began to shine a little brighter, a strong gust of wind snuffed it out. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon. It wasn't the job offer he'd been waiting for. Instead, it was his sister, her voice shaky and full of tears. Their mother, the same mother who had told him he could do anything, had been in a serious accident. She was in the hospital, and things looked very bad. The news hit Alex like a physical blow, knocking the air right out of his lungs. The job loss had been a wound, but this was a gaping chasm. He rushed to the hospital, his mind a whirlwind of fear and disbelief. Seeing his mother so small and still in the hospital bed was almost unbearable. All his focus on finding a new job, on getting his own life back in order, vanished. Everything felt meaningless compared to the worry for his mom. For weeks, he spent every spare moment at the hospital, watching, waiting, and praying. His savings, already dwindling from unemployment, were quickly used up by medical bills and travel costs. The stress was immense. He stopped looking for jobs, stopped calling friends, and barely ate. His mother eventually recovered, but slowly, and she needed a lot of care. Alex felt completely drained, both emotionally and financially. He had tried to stand up after the first fall, but this second, much harder blow had not only knocked him down again but left him lying there, too weary to even think about getting back on his feet. The world seemed to be conspiring against him, each new day bringing another reason to despair. The day it all felt too much arrived like any other, gray and unremarkable. Alex had just returned from another long, tiring visit to his mother, whose recovery was slower than anyone hoped. He unlocked the door to his small apartment, the quiet inside feeling heavier than usual. The stack of unopened mail on his tiny kitchen table seemed to mock him, each envelope a reminder of bills he couldn't pay and problems he couldn't solve. He didn't bother turning on the lights. He just sank onto the edge of his bed, the springs groaning under his weight. The room was cold, reflecting the chill that had settled deep within him. He looked around at the sparse furniture, the walls that felt like they were closing in. There was nothing left, no job, no real savings, no clear path forward. His dreams, once so vibrant, felt like dust motes dancing in the dim light, ready to disappear with the slightest breath. A tear traced a slow, lonely path down his cheek, followed by another, and then another, until his face was wet. He didn't sob loudly. It was a quiet, deep sadness that came from the very core of him. He felt utterly, completely empty. The fight was gone. The energy to even pretend to be okay had run out. He just wanted to disappear, to vanish into the shadows of his room and never have to face another problem again. He thought of his childhood drawings, the skyscraper and the happy family. They seemed like a cruel joke now. How could that hopeful boy have ever imagined this? He remembered his mother's words, "You can do anything you set your mind to." But what if his mind was too tired to set itself to anything? What if there was simply nothing left to give? In that moment, surrounded by the crushing weight of his failures and the silent plea of his exhaustion, Alex truly believed he had reached the end. There was no more fight left, no more hope to cling to. He felt like a ship that had not just lost its way but had sunk to the bottom of the ocean, too deep to ever see the sun again. As Alex lay there, lost in his despair, a soft chime from his phone broke the profound silence. He almost ignored it, but something in his heavy heart made him reach for it. It was a text message, not from a friend he'd pushed away, but from his mother. She had learned to text again, slowly, with great effort, as part of her recovery. The message was short, just a few wobbly typed words. "Thinking of you, my strong boy. Love you." Those simple words, sent with such effort, landed in Alex's heart like a warm stone dropped into an icy pond. His mother, who had been through so much, was thinking of Chow. She was calling him strong. It wasn't a grand speech or a magical solution, but it was real. It was her voice, even through text, reminding him of her unwavering love and belief. He remembered her smile from his childhood, the way she had ruffled his hair and told him he could do anything. Even now, in her weakness, she was still trying to be his strength. A flicker, almost too tiny to notice, sparked within him. It wasn't a burst of energy or a sudden plan, but a quiet, deep feeling that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't completely alone in this dark place. He looked at the phone again, at the glowing screen, and a new tear fell, but this one felt different. It wasn't a tear of pure sadness, but one mixed with a faint, almost forgotten warmth. He thought of his mother fighting so hard to get better, taking tiny, painful steps each day. If she could find the strength to keep going, to even send him a text, then perhaps he could too. The room was still cold, the bills still stacked, and his problems hadn't vanished. But for the first time in a long time, the darkness around him wasn't quite so absolute. A tiny, fragile seed of hope had been planted, watered by a mother's love and a memory of unwavering faith. It was barely there, a whisper, but it was enough to suggest that maybe, just maybe, the ship hadn't sunk completely. There might still be a way to surface. The warmth from his mother's text lingered, a tiny ember in the cold darkness of Alex's room. He lay there for a long time, not moving, just letting the quiet echo of her love settle over him. It wasn't enough to magically fix everything, but it was enough to make him think. If she, weak and recovering, could show such strength, what right did he have to just give up? With a deep, shaky breath, Alex pushed himself up. It felt like lifting 100 pounds. His muscles ached, not from work, but from weeks of doing nothing. The floor felt cold beneath his bare feet. He shuffled to the window, pulling back the heavy curtain that had been drawn for days. Gray light flooded the room, harsh and unwelcoming, but it was light, nonetheless. He blinked, letting his eyes adjust to the brightness. He looked at the pile of clothes on the chair, the empty coffee mugs on the table, the stack of bills. It was a mess, a true reflection of how he felt inside. But then his eyes landed on a small, framed photo on his dusty bookshelf. A picture of him and his mother, laughing, arms around each other. Her smile was wide and genuine. "My strong boy," she'd said. A tiny spark of resolve flickered within him. He wouldn't build a skyscraper today, or even find a new job. But he could do one small thing. He walked into the bathroom, turned on the tap, and splashed cold water on his face. The shock made him gasp, but it also felt oddly refreshing. He looked at his tired reflection in the mirror, seeing the shadows under his eyes, the worry etched into his brow. Then, with a determined grunt, he reached for his toothbrush. It was a simple act, one he'd ignored for too long. Brushing his teeth felt like a small victory, a tiny act of self-care in a world that felt completely out of control. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It was Alex, taking the smallest, most difficult step out of the deep pit he was in, not for anyone else, but for that little spark of hope his mother had reignited. Brushing his teeth was just the beginning. The next morning, Alex decided to tackle another small task, washing the pile of dirty dishes in his sink. The water was cold, the grease stubborn, but as he scrubbed, a strange sense of accomplishment filled him. It was a tiny win, but it was a win nonetheless. This small victory gave him courage to try something else. He started with one small chore a day, then two. He opened the blinds every morning, even when the sky was gray. He took short walks around his block, feeling the fresh air on his face, a sensation he hadn't truly noticed in months. It was hard. Some days the old feelings of sadness and hopelessness crept back in, whispering that it was all pointless. He'd stare at the phone, wanting to call a friend, but his courage would fail him. He'd try to write a cover letter for a job, only to delete it all, convinced he wasn't good enough. But each time he stumbled, he remembered his mother's text, her strong boy. He remembered her slow, painful steps toward recovery. He learned that even a small mistake, like forgetting to water a plant and watching it wilt, could teach him something about caring and persistence. He started reading articles about people who had faced hard times and found their way back. He learned that it was okay to fall, as long as you tried to stand up again. He took a temporary job at a local grocery store, stocking shelves. It wasn't the skyscraper dream, but it was a job. It gave him a reason to get up, made him feel useful, and, most importantly, brought in a little money to help with bills. It wasn't glorious, and some days he felt ashamed, but he pushed through. He learned to smile at customers, even when his heart was heavy. He learned to work hard, even when he was tired. Each small effort, each tiny step, was like laying one brick at a time, slowly rebuilding the foundation of his life. He was learning that greatness wasn't about avoiding falls, but about finding the strength to get up, dust yourself off, and keep moving forward, even when it felt like walking through thick mud. Working at the grocery store was hard, but it also brought a new kind of connection Alex hadn't realized he was missing. One afternoon, while carefully stacking cans of soup, an older woman with kind eyes and a warm smile approached him. Her name was Mrs. Gable, and she was a regular customer who always had a friendly word for everyone. "You're a hard worker, young man," she said, her voice gentle. "It's good to see someone who takes pride in what they do." Alex mumbled a quiet, "Thank you," not used to compliments. But Mrs. Gable didn't stop there. She started small conversations with him each time she visited, asking about his day, sharing little stories about her own life. Slowly, Alex found himself opening up, just a tiny bit. He told her about his mom, about the job he lost, about feeling lost himself. Mrs. Gable listened with genuine care, never judging, just offering soft nods and understanding words. One day, she brought him a homemade cookie. "For your strength," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Everyone needs a little boost sometimes." Her kindness was like a gentle rain on dry ground. It wasn't just Mrs. Gable. There was also Marco, a fellow stalker who was always joking and making the long shifts feel a little lighter. Marco, noticing Alex's quiet nature, started inviting him to grab a quick coffee after work. At first, Alex declined, but eventually, he said yes. He found himself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in ages. Marco never asked too many questions, but he always made Alex feel like he belonged. These new friendships, formed in the most unexpected places, slowly began to mend the loneliness that had settled so deeply within him. Mrs. Gable's quiet belief in him, and Marco's easygoing friendship, showed Alex that he wasn't completely alone. They saw past the sadness and the struggles, seeing the strong boy his mother spoke of. Their support was like building blocks, helping him construct a new kind of foundation, one made not just of his own efforts, but also of the gentle, steady belief of others. He was learning that sometimes, to get back up, you need a helping hand, even a small one, to pull you out of the mud. The small victories and new friendships at the grocery store slowly built up Alex's courage. But there was still a big fear he hadn't faced, speaking in public, especially about his struggles. He'd always been good at his old job, but presentations filled him with dread, and talking about his past felt like admitting defeat all over again. One evening, Marco told him about a local community center that offered free workshops on job searching and building new skills. "They have a session on telling your story," Marco said. "Might be good, to talk it out." Quote, Alex's stomach twisted. Talking about his failures in front of strangers? The thought made his palms sweat. He almost said no, but then he pictured Mrs. Gable's kind smile and his mother's text. He thought of all the small steps he'd taken. What was one more? He arrived at the community center, his heart thumping like a drum. The room was small, filled with about 10 other people, all looking just as nervous as he felt. The instructor, a kind-faced woman named Sarah, encouraged everyone to share a little about themselves and their journey. As people spoke, Alex's turn drew closer, and a cold dread crept up his spine. His mouth felt dry. He just wanted to disappear. When Sarah called his name, Alex stood up, his knees shaking. He looked down at his hands, then up at the faces in the room. They weren't judging him. They were listening, some with soft smiles, some with understanding nods. Taking a deep breath, he started to speak, his voice quiet at first, then growing stronger. He talked about losing his job, about his mother's accident, about feeling completely lost. He even shared his childhood dream of building skyscrapers and how far he felt from it now. As he spoke, something shifted. The words, usually locked away, flowed out, each one easing a little bit of the heavy weight he carried. He saw a few people nod in agreement, some even had tears in their eyes. When he finished, the room was silent for a moment, then burst into gentle applause. Sarah smiled warmly. "Thank you, Alex," she said. That took incredible courage. In that moment, standing there, having shared his raw truth, Alex felt a wave of relief wash over him. He hadn't just spoken, he had truly faced a deep fear. It wasn't about building a skyscraper, but about rebuilding himself, one honest word at a time. He realized that true strength wasn't about never falling, but about having the courage to stand up and speak your truth, even when your voice shakes. Sharing his story at the community center was a turning point for Alex. It was like finally letting go of a heavy bag he'd been carrying for too long. He started going to more workshops, learning new computer skills, and even volunteered to help organize some local events. He found a quiet joy in helping others, a feeling he hadn't known before. His temporary job at the grocery store became more than just a way to pay bills. He genuinely enjoyed talking to Mrs. Gable and joking with Marco. He learned that being kind and helpful to others brought a different kind of richness to his life. One day, the store manager offered him a full-time position with more responsibilities. It wasn't the big corporate job he'd once imagined, but it was steady, respected, and it made him feel truly valued. He accepted with a proud smile. Alex also started spending more time with his mother. Her recovery was slow but steady, and their bond grew even stronger. He cooked for her, read to her, and just sat with her, happy to share quiet moments. He realized that the time he spent with her, truly being present, was more precious than any skyscraper he could have built. His apartment, once a symbol of his despair, slowly transformed. He tidied it up, added a few plants, and even framed some new photos, pictures of him and Marco laughing, and a recent one of him and his mom, both smiling brightly. It wasn't a fancy house with a big garden yet, but it was a home, filled with peace and a sense of calm. His life wasn't what he had planned as a 7-year-old boy, He wasn't building gleaming skyscrapers or driving a fancy car. Instead, he was building something much more important, a life filled with genuine connections, quiet purpose, and a deep understanding of his own strength. He was a trusted employee, a caring son, and a loyal friend. It was a different kind of greatness, one built from the ground up, brick by painful, honest, and hopeful brick. And it felt good, truly good, in a way his old dreams never quite captured. Years passed, and Alex sat on a park bench watching children play, the sun warm on his face. He wasn't the boy who drew skyscrapers, nor the broken man lost in a messy apartment. He was somewhere in between, and that was more than enough. His mother was fully recovered, her laughter bright and strong again. Marco was still his friend, and Mrs. Gable, though a bit older, still offered him warm smiles at the grocery store. He thought back to that darkest day, when he lay on his bed, ready to give up. It felt like a lifetime ago, a bad dream he had somehow woken from. He remembered the feeling of failure, the crushing weight of everything going wrong, but he also remembered the small spark from his mother's text, the cold water on his face, the scrubbing of dirty dishes. Each tiny step, each moment of pushing through, had led him here. His life wasn't a perfect picture, untouched by hardship. It had dents and scars, like an old beloved book, but those marks told a story of falling down, not once but many times, and finding the strength to get back up. He realized that the greatness he'd once dreamed of wasn't about fame or fortune. It was about resilience, about finding joy in simple things, about the love of family and friends, and about the quiet pride of knowing you faced your fears. He hadn't built a skyscraper, but he had built a stable, meaningful life. He hadn't avoided being knocked down, but he had learned how to stand tall again. He understood now that life would always throw challenges his way, just like rain would always fall. But he also knew he had the power to face them, to learn, and to grow. The journey from rock bottom to this quiet, good life had taught him the most important lesson of all. Never giving up isn't about never falling, it's about always choosing to rise, and in that rising, finding your own true greatness. He smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile. Life had knocked him down, but he had gotten back up, and he was grateful for every step of the untold story.